Easter, one of the most celebrated and spiritually profound festivals in the Christian world, has a history that stretches back thousands of years, intertwining religious belief, ancient tradition, and cultural transformation. Long before it became a cornerstone of Christianity, Easter's roots can be traced deep into ancient pagan rituals that marked the renewal of life and the rebirth of nature. Understanding Easter's full history means exploring how humanity has, across millennia, celebrated the eternal cycle of life, death, and resurrection in one form or another. It is a journey that begins not in the churches of Christendom but in the fields and forests of pre-Christian Europe and the fertile lands of the ancient Near East. In the ancient world, spring was not merely a season, it was a miracle. After the harshness of winter, the return of warmth, green growth, and the promise of harvest symbolized survival and continuity. For ancient peoples whose lives depended directly on nature's rhythms, spring was sacred. Various civilizations held festivals around the spring equinox, celebrating fertility, renewal, and the victory of light over darkness. The Babylonians honored the goddess Ishtar, often associated with love and fertility, whose myth involved the descent into the underworld and a return that symbolized new life. This connection between death and rebirth resonated with agricultural societies that saw their crops die and come back each year. Scholars later noted how the name Easter in English bears a resemblance to Ishtar, though the linguistic connection is debated. Still, the symbolic similarity between these celebrations remains striking. In the regions of Northern Europe, Germanic and Anglo-Saxon tribes held spring festivals in honor of the dawn goddess Eostre or Astra. She was associated with fertility, light, and new beginnings. The very word Easter is believed to have originated from her name. According to the early English monk Bede, writing in the 8th century, the month of Easterminath was dedicated to this goddess, and the name persisted even after the people converted to Christianity. As Christianity spread across Europe, missionaries often adopted local festivals and reinterpreted them in the light of Christian theology. Thus, the old celebrations of spring were gradually transformed into the festival of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, maintaining many of their symbols of life, fertility, and renewal. The Christian meaning of Easter, however, begins in a very different context, Jerusalem, during the time of Roman rule in the 1st century. For Christians, Easter commemorates the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which took place 3 days after his crucifixion at Calvary. The resurrection is the foundation of Christian faith, symbolizing victory over death and the promise of eternal life. According to the New Testament, Jesus was crucified on a Friday, now observed as Good Friday, and rose from the dead on the 3rd day. As Europe entered the Renaissance, the meaning and celebration of Easter evolved alongside dramatic cultural and religious changes. The world was shifting rapidly. The invention of the printing press, the rediscovery of classical learning, and the spread of humanist ideas were transforming how people understood faith, art, and the universe itself. Amid this transformation, Easter remained the heartbeat of Christian spirituality, a moment of awe and celebration that linked humanity to divine mystery. The Renaissance artists and thinkers infused the story of the resurrection with renewed depth, portraying it as both a historical miracle and a symbol of the human spirit's power to rise beyond suffering. Churches across Europe became adorned with paintings, sculptures, and stained glass windows depicting Christ's triumph over death, reflecting a profound synthesis of faith and artistic genius. The Reformation of the 16th century, led by figures like Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Huldrych Zwingli, brought radical changes to how Easter was observed. Luther retained many traditional Christian feasts, including Easter, but emphasized its spiritual message over elaborate rituals. Protestants moved away from some of the pageantry and fasting practices that had characterized the medieval church, focusing instead on personal faith and the direct relationship between believers and God. In Catholic regions, the Counter-Reformation reaffirmed Easter's significance with renewed vigor. Churches encouraged elaborate processions, music, and dramatizations of the Passion to inspire devotion. Thus, even amid division, Easter remained a shared anchor, a point of unity within diversity. By the 17th and 18th centuries, European society had begun to change again. Science, exploration, and philosophy reshaped how people viewed the world. Yet, The story of the resurrection continued to speak to something eternal in the human heart. Easter sermons during this period often reflected themes of personal renewal, moral rebirth, and the harmony between faith and reason. The Enlightenment, while challenging some aspects of religious dogma, did not erase the emotional resonance of Easter. Many thinkers viewed it as a moral allegory, representing the triumph of virtue and truth over ignorance and despair. Even those who questioned organized religion found meaning in the symbolic cycle of death and renewal that Easter embodied. Easter customs, meanwhile, grew richer and more diverse. In countries like Italy, Spain, and Portugal, Holy Week processions became major public events, blending deep religious devotion with cultural spectacle. These processions, often involving life-sized statues of Christ and the Virgin Mary carried through the streets, drew entire communities together. In Eastern Europe, families prepared special foods for Easter Sunday, such as sweet breads, meats, and colored eggs. In Greece, people greeted each other with the phrase, Christos Anesti. As the modern era entered the 21st century, Easter stood as one of the few traditions that managed to maintain its spiritual roots while also adapting to a rapidly changing global culture. In an age defined by technology, globalization, and secularization, the festival continued to unite billions of people around a message of hope, forgiveness, and renewal. Whether celebrated in grand cathedrals, quiet chapels, open-air churches, or family homes, Easter remained a symbol of life's ability to begin again after suffering. Its universality lay not only in religious belief but in the deep human need for rebirth, a yearning that transcends time, geography, and culture. In the Western world, particularly in Europe and North America, Easter traditions became both deeply cherished and widely diversified. Churches filled with worshippers who came together to commemorate the resurrection through prayer, song, and communion. The solemn tone of Good Friday gave way to the joy and brightness of Easter Sunday. Bells rang, choirs sang, Christ the Lord is risen today, and families dressed in vibrant spring colors gathered for meals featuring ham, lamb, or roast chicken, accompanied by bread and eggs that symbolized abundance and renewal. For children, the Easter Bunny remained a beloved figure, and Easter egg hunts became community-wide celebrations, spreading laughter and excitement in parks and gardens. These customs, though modernized, continued to echo the ancient rhythms of spring and rebirth that had inspired people for millennia. In the United States, the White House Easter egg roll became an enduring national tradition. First held in 1878 during the presidency of Rutherford B. Hayes, it began as a simple event where children rolled colored eggs down the White House lawn. Over time, it grew into a grand annual festivity attended by thousands of families, featuring games, storytelling, and music. Though it might seem far removed from the solemn origins of Easter, the event symbolized the same spirit of joy, innocence, and renewal that lies at the heart of the season. Across cities and small towns alike, Easter parades, sunrise services, and charity drives became part of the American cultural fabric, reflecting both faith and community spirit. In Latin America, Easter retained its emotional intensity and rich cultural diversity. Cities like Seville, Antigua, and Quito became world-famous for their Holy Week processions. Streets filled with incense, music, and devotion as participants carried elaborately decorated floats depicting scenes from the Passion and Resurrection. In many regions, entire towns worked together to create colorful carpets of flowers, sawdust, and sand, depicting biblical imagery on the streets for processions to pass over. The blend of indigenous artistry and Catholic devotion created an atmosphere that was both mystical and deeply human. On Easter Sunday, the mood shifted dramatically from mourning to jubilation, with fireworks.